Hey everybody, David here, and today I want to talk about my top 10 Muppet movies, and that's how many there are currently in the world. There are 10. There's probably another one that I don't have on this list because I never seen it. I think it was Labyrinth with David Bowie. I believe that's considered a Muppet movie because it's from Jim Henson Productions. Obviously, it's not the Muppets that you know, but it has the puppeteers and all that that are part of what makes the Muppets Muppets. And if the Jim Henson Company has some sort of an attachment to it, then it is going to be considered on this list. Let us get started. At number 10, I have The Dark Crystal. A lot of people love this one. They hold cherished memories about it. I'm going to be honest, I watched it for the first time a few years back, and I was bored to tears. This is clearly a movie that you have to be a kid to enjoy when you're younger, because if you're not, you're going to say, what is all the hype about? Because that was me during The Dark Crystal. So moving on to number 9, I have Muppets from Space. Definitely the worst Muppet movie on this list. Yeah, what can I say about it? I mean, there's a few okay moments in the movie. One in particular is the aliens spoof scene in the movie. If you've seen Muppets from Space, you know what I'm talking about. The story is alright, but do we need to really know Gonzo's origin? I don't think so. But for what it was an okay little film. Moving on to number 8, I have Muppets Most Wanted. This was the most recent Muppet movie in theaters. Came out in 2014 following the Jason Segel Muppet film. And I'm going to say, I thought this one was rather weak in comparison to the first one, or the one that this followed. Yeah, going to Russia did nothing for me. Kermit clone or whatever, Kermit's evil twin, was a little annoying. Yeah, I did not like this one. Even with Tina Fey in the movie, it was again just like Muppets from Space. It was okay. It had some okay moments, but for the most part, it's pretty forgettable. Moving on to number 7, I have The Muppets Take Manhattan. This one I used to love this one when I was a kid. I remember renting this movie, getting my parents to rent this movie all the time when I was younger. This and Masters of the Universe. Totally two opposite films that are very different from one another. But yeah, this was one of the ones that I was obsessed with. There's another movie that I was really obsessed with on this list, but I'll get to it a little later. It's a little bit higher on the list. This is more memorable nowadays, more for the Muppet Baby scene. Obviously, Muppet Babies became a TV series. Kermit and Piggy's wedding is also very memorable. But for the most part, I feel a lot of the jokes are not as funny as I remembered them to be. But it's still an enjoyable film. After all, Rizzo the rat is introduced in this one. And there's some funny moments with Piggy and Kermit and the rest of the gang. Just out of the earlier films, I finally see that, yeah, this is not the best of those earlier films. And let's move on. To number 6, I have The Great Muppet Caper. I used to not like this one that much when I was younger, but I have a little bit more respect for it now. It has the Muppets going to Britain, so of course you're going to get some British humor in there too. Yeah, this was an okay one. I actually don't mind it. I like it much better than the ones that I just talked about. Obviously, it's still not great. There's still some jokes that fall flat when it comes to the Muppets, but for the most part, it was a much better film that I think maybe, I don't know how it was received back in the day, but I think if you have kids today, I don't think kids would be okay with this movie. I think it would be a little slow for their taste. There are a couple of scenes that I'm like, I could have done without that scene. But you know what? For the most part, for the year that it came out, yeah, I think it was a good movie for its time. Moving on to number 5, I have Muppet Treasure Island. I didn't think much of this movie when it first came out, but I love this movie now. I think Tim Curry as Long John Silver is amazing. I think he's what makes this movie. And yeah, it was the Muppets reenacting Treasure Island, which is a popular novel. I think was a lot of fun, and it followed in suit of the previous movie that came before this one, which is higher on my list, which we'll get to. But yeah, for the most part, if you are a fan of Tim Curry, you might want to check this one out. He is definitely the highlight of this film, and the Muppets are fun too. So there you go. Number 4, I have The Muppet Movie. Again, this one, just like The Great Muppet Caper, I didn't really care much for this one when I was younger. But I actually went back to it a couple of times, and man, this movie is probably one of the funniest Muppet movies. I was going to say Marvel. One of the funniest Muppet movies of all time. The jokes in this movie still hold up. And I don't know why I didn't like it when I was a kid. Maybe because it was the pacing and the time. This movie came out in 1979, so obviously it was like Star Wars. It was older, so maybe I didn't like the way it was filmed or something. But when I watch it now as an adult, I see so much in that movie that I'm like, wow, there was a lot that went over my head when I saw this as a kid. And I would recommend it to an adult that likes family films. Obviously, you're not going to get like what's coming out in theaters this weekend, which is the reason why I'm doing this list. But look, you're going to get some clever humor, I think, in this one. And there's some really nice cameos from old actors from old Hollywood. Not too old, like Steve Martin is in here. Hopefully some young people out there know Steve Martin. I think he hasn't done anything big lately, but he's still a recognizable actor. So go and check this one out. I totally recommend it if you haven't seen it. Number 3 on my list. This one, I don't know how people feel about it. I know this Nostalgia Critic did a video where he couldn't talk crap about it, that he decided to scrap the video altogether. Follow That Bird. That's right. This is a Sesame Street movie on this list. I never saw Adventures of Elmo in Grouchland or whatever it was called, because I hated Elmo. But I was a huge fan of Big Bird growing up, and that movie came out at the right time, because I was probably 4 years old when Sesame Street Follow That Bird came out. And yeah, I loved that movie, and I haven't seen it in a long while, obviously, but I did remember watching it up until my teenage years, and still enjoying it then too. Like, it's an interesting one. If you haven't seen it, but you love the Muppets and you love Sesame Street, because there are adults that still watch Sesame Street, surprisingly. I shouldn't really be that surprised. People can like anything nowadays. But yeah, this is one to check out, especially if you're a big fan of Big Bird, because the movie definitely centers on him a lot. But it gives all the other Sesame Street characters something to do in this one as well. So moving on to number 2. This is a tradition of mine to watch every Christmas, The Muppet Christmas Carol. Michael Caine, just like, in Muppet Treasure Island, Tim Curry was one of the highlights. Michael Caine was the highlight in The Muppet Christmas Carol. And yes, it is one of those movies, along with Home Alone 1 and 2, and A Christmas Vacation, and many other Christmas movies that are slipping my mind right now. This is one of those movies I will watch once every Christmas. I think it's an enjoyable movie. You can't go wrong with Muppet and Christmas, because they just mesh well together. There's some other Christmas specials with the Muppets, and I think one is called the Muppet Family Christmas, where literally all Muppets, like Muppets and Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock, they all come together in one Christmas special, and that's another Christmas special with the Muppets that I watched. That's not on this list because it's not a theatrical movie, but The Muppet Christmas Carol is definitely one I had to put up way up this list. And so my number one all-time favorite Muppet movie is, that's right, The Muppets. This movie came out in 2011. It was the first Disney-owned Muppet movie, because I think some of the other ones, some were done by Columbia Pictures and some were done by in collaboration with Disney. Like Disney distributed the films for Jim Henson. But this movie with Jason Segel and the one with Tina Fey, Muppets Most Wanted, those ones were done by Disney, because Disney had bought out the Muppets by that point, or the Jim Henson Company. And I love this movie. I think it is the greatest Muppet movie of all time. And this is a movie that's a love story to Muppet fans. If you are a fan of the Muppets, if you grew up with these characters and know who they are, adult or not, you will love this movie, I think. If you have nostalgia for the Muppet Show, from, it ran from the 70s to 80s. They had the Muppet Show. It was kind of like Saturday Night Live, but for Muppets, and it wasn't live. They had like guests on every episode, a new host that would be on every episode. Mark Hamill even guest starred as Luke Skywalker on one. And this captures that spirit, but elevates it and reminds you why you love these characters and why you love that show. It was a fantastic film, and I'm not gonna lie, it's one of those films, those family films, that get me the tears going, man. It is a great film. That speech that Kermit makes at the end is a fantastic speech. It's a great film, and I recommend it to anybody who is a fan of the Muppets. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. There's some great songs that follow suit, like and some old familiar songs as well that you'll hear in some of the past Muppet movies. And it's great. I love it. So with that being said, I hope you guys like this video. Please subscribe to my channel, especially if you're a huge fan of the Muppets. I will be reviewing the Happytime Murders this weekend, so I'll be checking it out tomorrow night. The first R-rated Muppet movie. I'm calling it a Muppet movie because whether you like it or not, it's directed by Brian Hansen, who directed Christmas, the Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island. He's the son of Jim Henson, so I'm considering it a Muppet movie because no matter what, they are puppets created in the Jim Henson Company, so they're Muppets to me. And if the Sesame Street characters can be considered Muppets and not owned by the Muppet Company or even Disney, they're owned by separate companies, then I think these puppets in the Happytime Murders can be considered Muppets as well. So with that being said, until next time, everybody, take care.